Hi Shaz, how are you doing? That last video was a little bit lower, right? Lower energy. Good way to start the day. Lower energy. Nice and calm. Walk through the narrative of my life as I've been constructing it so far. I have these emotional signposts. So that when I go back to write the book that I'm gonna fucking sell this time about my ideas about politics, my ideas about society, about family, first-hand experiential shit that I've lived. Also, the latest science and trends in sociology, psychology, political economy. This and more will be yours when you buy Shaz's book, To Be Determined. Now, the title is going to be Truth and Narratives. So that is what we are exploring, truth and the narratives we use to convey those truths. Now, if you use a false narrative, then that is no longer a truth, but a lie or a deception. Words that we don't really throw around as much nowadays, lies and deceptions, because we don't really believe in lies and deceptions, because we don't really believe in truth as a society. Our society has reached the cynical, suicidal point in which when truth doesn't have any meaning, then neither does lying. Because how can you lie without an objective measurement of truth to judge the lie against? So now there's just PR, which was evolved out of the propaganda industry, which evolved out of the systemization of deceit. It's interesting how all these things work, right? PR, public relations, advertising, purposeful lying in order to make money. Now, advertising, there's no truth in advertising. Well, what is the most you can lie within the framework of the law? I believe that's how advertising works. That's how I play the game. I kept my ads just defensible enough to get my client's attention. But the way that I avoided being an asshole is that when I was doing real estate, as soon as I had their attention, I'd quickly let them know who I was, what my values were, and the service I offered within 5 minutes. Now, do you want to continue or not? Choose your own adventure. And I find the people who want to pay someone for an honest service, knowing that that person's a professional. And if it's anything less than that, then get the heck out of here. The heck, see, I said heck, not hell. Because I'm going to stop fucking cursing in 2020. 2019, I'm still correcting. Yeah, 2020 when I actually run for president. That's what this is all about, running for president. Or I thought it was about selling a book. It was about reclaiming my sanity because I was homeless recently. Or it was to find a life partner, figure out these sexual patterns that I keep getting into. And it was about expressing my art is what it was about. Or maybe finding inner peace beyond art, politics, and these sexual relations. No, I think I'm going to stick with the president. It was about running for president. That's what it was about. All right. Now I'm actually in the... Am I going to keep that soft voice the whole time? Hello, this is Shaz on the ones and twos, talking about Occupy Wall Street. What we're going to do here... What if I just held this really close? I bet I could do that for the whole time. Let me see how a video... I have a whole video, the last one, where I was keeping it nice and smooth. Now this one I'm going to be keeping it nice and smooth, but also really nice and close. Let's see what it sounds like when Shaz is all up on that mic. Really nice and close. Just making love to the mic is what we're doing, really. This is a time when we're going to talk about something very intimate and dear to my heart. Yeah, we're talking about Occupy Wall Street. Occupation for the emancipation of the general population. So, let's start this. See, Shaz, you act a little sexy and you remember a story. So, the last video, I was trying to catch up that whole narrative since that was the first video of the day and of the week, and I did party a little bit this weekend. Not party, but connected with some folks in Slab City who I seem to be vibing with, and put some money into that bank and hung out. Smoked a lot of weed. I was going to do one of these videos, smoking a joint, but then my folks are about to come home. They really don't like the weed smoking. Try to be respectful boundaries in your relationships, whether through addicts or even just with your folks, who none of us are without our own certain addictions, unless you can look in your life at all your behavior patterns and claim that all of them provide you benefit. Some of them might be providing you something. Addicted to sugar, addicted to too much media, too much this, too much that. But let's get back on it. We're gonna do it like this. We're gonna do a nice and smooth video. Shaz speaking right up into the mic. I had left Puerto Rico, driven my friend's car from Chicago to LA. I had picked up those two people off of Craigslist. One of them was the institutional anarchist studying in college, which I thought was interesting because I was circling around the edges of anarchism but never really dug into it. This year when I decided to dig into it, I'm reading Woodcock's History of Anarchism, out of which I'm finding some really cool other people I'm going to look into. Proudhon, definitely. Some of these other guys, I like the non-joiners. They're really anti-organization, anti-hierarchy. To get, if anarchism isn't a place that will exist in real life, like maybe if it truly is a utopian thought, it at least in their ideology offers corrective measures for bureaucracy, because they are the anti-bureaucratic ideology. And when power gets too concentrated, then these are the ants that are attracted to that sugar, as things seem to bring up their antithesis in life. We're all Hegelians, aren't we? Maybe not. I fracture my reality not into a thesis, antithesis, but actually into 6 sets. But that's neither here nor there. Okay. So I'm driving back. I pick up those 2 anarchists. No, the one anarchist kid and just one hippie girl going for a ride. Kind of thinking that the door's open with this one. I just left shot, remember, in Puerto Rico because I'm feeling like Shaz. This isn't your girl, but you've proven time and time again now in your life that you are worthy of love. So I'm looking for something casual. I'm feeling like the door's a little open. She's doing some yoga stretches while we're stopped at a gas station. I'm kind of eyeing her. I'm like, in my life, what I realize, now this isn't always true. So just because a girl comes into your field of view doesn't mean that she wants to be hit on. But from the girls I know and the experiences I've had, if they're in your field of view, sometimes it's for a reason. A lot of times. I'm just bumbling through life until I notice something in front of me. But the girl noticed me a while ago and then positioned herself in front of me. In the gym, if a girl starts working out right in front of you. Isn't that the guy's trick? Always going trying to work out next to the cute girls. I have a rule, I don't really talk to people in the gym. I'm there to work. Because I talk a lot. If I open these floodgates, who knows what will happen. I won't get. Also because maximum testosterone production is waiting 30 seconds to a minute max between your sets. So I try to keep that. If I wait more than a minute, I feel like I'm losing my benefit. But anyways, it comes time to camp out, me and the girl and the guy. And the guy, institutional anarchist he is, having been in college and understood virtues and how to virtue signal, said, I will be the gentleman and sleep outside. And me, having lived on an island where there's a lot of competition for these cute tourist girls that get off the boat, and you learn to elbow your way in there, and if you don't, survival of the fittest, my friend. And so down there really taught me, like business. I needed this in business later on when I relate business to sex a lot. You need to be leaning forward. You're not going to catch anything standing straight up. You need to have a little bit of sense of urgency. You need to ask for the sale without making people uncomfortable. You can do that in a way that is consultative, but they still know you're about the business. So when it comes time to set up the tent, what's going to happen? 2 guys, 1 girl. This girl seems to be both of our types. A little bit of hippie for me, but she's going to college, and this kid's going to college. And I'm a couple years older than both of them, so a little bit more experience too. So he says, I am sleeping outside, like the gentleman. And I cut him off quick. I say, that is great, because we were saying that the tent maybe isn't big enough for 3 people. So he says, I will sleep outside. Proposing, I guess the unspoken proposal was that we'll give the girl the tent and the 2 guys will sleep outside. But what I said was, that's great. He goes, that solves that problem. I'd love to sleep in the tent. And I look over at the girl. No objections. So if the girl was, that was one indication that the door might be open. She was okay with sharing the tent with me. And we just cut out the competition. And now the guy has to sit, and he was stewing a little bit because me and him, two guys, one girl, if she's cute, we were talking, and as things do in a confined space, probably talking ourselves up, trying to get this girl's attention. And so, I guess, yeah, that was just funny. He excluded himself from the running right then and there. We go to the campsite. I'm already thinking, okay, this is good, but it doesn't mean that you have the green light to grope or Shaz. I knew that much by then. Still make mistakes, but hopefully not the same ones. I speak openly about my sexuality and things like this because I feel like men's health is something that we should talk more about. How to openly pursue a female without making them feel uncomfortable or making yourself come off as a creepy molester / rapist / whatever. It's not desirable to exhibit those characteristics. Not desirable to have those characteristics, but being someone who's been misunderstood most of their life, I could see how the best of intentions can come off terribly. So let us go back to the story of how Shaz navigated this. Not having really gone to college, remember, so I've learned later that approaching a woman, you have to know how she was socialized. If she's been to college, she's been exposed to certain ideas and certain assumptions, which I came to this night. So we go to set up the tent, and there is a campfire just down the way. We can see it. Us and this other campfire are the only people in this camping grounds. It's just below Tahoe, so we're about maybe 3 hours outside San Francisco. But I told him I'm too tired, can't really drive for the night. But I kind of was feeling the vibe. Me and this girl were gonna do our little thing before I dropped her off. So we go to the setup camp, and I say, let's go say hi to our neighbors. We go over there. They're smoking hash. Amazing. So, of course, Shaz, who's never superstitious about most any drugs. Some of them are superstitious about methamphetamines and fentanyl, which means most opiates nowadays. I'm still developing my philosophy of drugs, I guess. But hash is definitely in the okay list. I smoke some hash. Anarchist Kid smokes a little bit. I definitely just keep going until I'm nice and up there. The girl says no. These details are important for later on in the story. Go back, set up the tent I think we set up the tent before we went over there. And then now we have the noble little institutional anarchist who gets to sleep outside in his sleeping bag, with all of the virtue which he previously signaled he had of being chivalrous, while animal barbaric Shaz gets to go inside with his prize. But is she my prize? I'm not sure. Now we enter phase 2 of the Shaz barbaric pursuit. We've isolated the female of the species away from the competition. She's shown indication, and we've given ample opportunity for her to veto the advances. But she's decided to spend a night in the tent with the Shaz. Where's this going to go? This is something that I need to be better at. I just did this recently, where laying next to a girl, you're still not assumed you're going to have sex. The younger version of me would just initiate contact and escalate. You put an arm around, you start getting closer together. It works a lot of times, and the girl will turn into you. And a light touch there's different ways to escalate touch in a way that expresses consent from both parties. An arm around the waist becomes her putting her arm around your arm, tightening up. All she has to do is push her butt a little bit into your crotch to give you the signal, and things start going away from the rational, more towards just the body mechanics of what bodies tend to do when they get close to each other and are of the opposite sexes, or have a sexual desire between them. So I do that, but nowadays I probably do it more playfully and verbally, and I don't want to get to the point where I have to ask, can I please kiss you or fuck you, but there's verbal banter which gives the girl a way to back out while saving face, while also makes it clear about my intentions of what I want to do. And if I had to summarize my wisdom so far in pursuing females, it would be that people need an out. The girl needs an out because as a male, the stronger of the sex usually, you want to always acknowledge that things can quickly become uncomfortable for the female, and you might not be aware of it. That's a huge blind spot I've noticed in my life, and I think with other guys too. You don't realize how much fear and physical danger is involved on the other side, just below the surface. Even if they're comfortable now, it can quickly get to a point in which they feel uncomfortable. So you want to always be checking in. Everything okay? So that's one of the reasons why physical escalation sometimes isn't the best. I did that when in Airbnb. I put my arm around a girl who I asked her if I could get in bed, and she said I could. But after my arm was around her, I realized this isn't really, she doesn't feel comfortable. And then I backed up, and when I backed up, she asked if she could spend the night on the couch. And then maybe it's because we didn't escalate to the point now it's just weird. That can happen too. Trying to initiate a sexual encounter and it hitting a stumbling block or a roadblock, all of a sudden you have to just abort. But again, to save face, not just to be physically comfortable, but also some people might feel rejected. You might feel rejected. So sometimes verbalization is good. That's where the banter comes in, the being clever, being humorous. Humor diffuses these situations a lot of times. Acknowledging the tension in the room. Look at, what are you going to do? Something. This is where your own creativity has to frame the reality in such a way to win you the girl, right? But at this point, we're just escalating physically. And surprise, surprise, is being reciprocated. My arm around her, she's backing her ass into my crotch. She turns into me, we start making out. This is important also because it lets me know that this guy who cut himself out of the tent, this girl probably would have gotten with either one of us. Me coming from the island and being in tourism had started to pick up that type of radar of people who, when they're traveling, these are just, if it's a story and an adventure and you're not a douchebag and you're clean, and that's what it was. She was traveling, and this was a car with two dudes. If I had said I had a girlfriend or fiance and let them banter, and also if I had offered them the tent and said I wanted to sleep outside, I'm sure this would have happened between them two. He had expressed interest in her. But for whatever reason, now it's Shaz in the tent. Things are getting heavy. A lot of heavy kissing, a lot of heavy petting. This is another thing I realized is allow her to grab your cock. Allow her to initiate that part too. I've initiated sex before, and the girls kind of felt, no, not at this time, in a later relationship, but I was trying to be aware of how I came off. And in a later relationship, the girl told me I initiated sex. She felt I bugged her into having it the first time. Nothing physically coercing her, holding her down, but you want to make sure they don't have a negative interpretation of the experience. But this comes from honestly talking after the fact when we were breaking up, and some of that negativity could have been the fact that we were breaking up too. But so even back then, I was sensitive to that, especially with a girl like this. Another reason why I was being sensitive to that is that these are college-educated kids, and I didn't go to college, so I know that they socialize differently than me, and I could read this girl's feminism a mile off. She was a hippie in the sense that we enjoyed nature and spirituality and free love, hooking up with a random rideshare, traveling cross country. But I also knew that she was throwing her feminine identity around, which more power to her, but I knew that there could be traps for me as a guy who throws around his masculine identity a little bit. Sometimes those can clash. So sure enough, I'm escalating to the point where I could take off her pants. I'm very aroused by now. We're making out very strongly. She had lips like bubblegum, those nice soft white girl lips, which are just like, you press into them and they're just like soft packs of bubblegum. That's all I could describe him as. Just wonderful mouth to kiss, a wonderful body. That nice hippie smell that is like partly body sweat, partly patchouli or something. It's not, I could smell it now just talking about it. it's a little bit about her arousal from her sex scent, but then a little bit just body perspiration. Just people who are just more rugged, and just sometimes that's your thing. And if your pheromones match or whatever, the more the smell that's coming off her, the better. We're not talking about multiple days of funk. I mean the smell that is off of you just after you step out of the shower. You have a natural perspiration and smell that comes off you that's not ripe from the bacteria decomposing on your body, but just your natural perspiration. She had a great natural smell. And then, but she's telling me no. So we keep making out, and then I put another hand down her pants. No. But she's telling me no, but we keep making out. So, she's on top of me now, grinding on me. This is very important too. And then she's grinding on me, and so I'm trying to unbutton her pants, and she's on me, just dry humping me. And she tells me, I keep telling you no, I don't think you're respecting me when I say that. And I just start laughing, and I say, and this is, I was expecting this, because I was expecting, after the first or two no's, it was like, okay, she allowed me to escalate to this physical touch. But then this has always been my approach, just see how far we can go, but then accept it if we can't. So that's why I started laughing, because as soon as she said, whenever girls bring up consent with me, because I try to value communication and a connection on a non-verbal level, but an emotional level, then that pretty much tells me that this isn't going to go anywhere. Because if we're going to have to break it down that clearly, then obviously we're different types of people. So as soon as she said that, I kind of laughed, because I kind of, all right, no, we're not doing this. But she said, what? And I said, it'd be easier to take you seriously if you weren't on top of me. You're physically in control now. She's on top of me, grinding on my obviously hard penis erect underneath my clothes. I only wear board shorts, very flimsy layer of clothing, or sweats. I hardly ever wear underwear. So she could very easily tell what I want. But she keeps saying no while she dry humps me. So that's why I laughed. I basically said, I'd take you more seriously if you weren't grinding on me while you told me no. And then she gets off. But I already knew when I laughed. I said, no, we're not going to be able to communicate. She wants me to approach her in her way. And she said, do you have a condom? And I said, no. And she said, oh, I thought someone like you would. Someone like me. I've been objectified before but I felt this was coming. She didn't smoke with the hash guys, which tells me that she wants to keep her senses about her. More power to you. I did smoke. And then she didn't say no when I said, hey, tent me and you, this guy just made it easy for us, which tells me that she was open for an exchange with a person like me. But I've been typecast as a gigolo, a wild man. My story is about Puerto Rico. Of course, I had some female conquest stories in there. And she wanted the experience of romping with a person like me. But only on her terms. She wanted to make sure that the animal was well on the leash. And also me supposedly being the type of guy I was who has sex with randoms, which I don't know if life has proven that. I'm as much monogamous as I'm adventurous, depending on what I feel my blind spots are or what my appetite is. But I definitely like to couple up, and the best sex I've had is in relationships. And I have conversations like this with friends of mine, females, and I'm like, I don't know if I'm going to keep going after those young fruit or if I want to have a nice old orchard. Because when you're older, you can walk under the shade of the trees and family and things that the guys who always jump to younger women don't have. It'd be nice to have a family. I just got a message from a Tinder girl from recently. So Shaz has a way of, even if the girls don't find themselves into my appetite, we're able to stay friendly still. But my parents are calling me right now to speak to me. I told them I don't speak to them while I'm doing these videos. But this girl, I'm not her normal interaction probably. So she pulls a little bit of power rank, saying, you're not respecting my no, which I have to respond with a little bit of logic. You're voice is telling me one thing, but your body's telling me another kind of. I basically tell her, if you don't want to have sex, please just get off of me then, because you're on top of me. So she gets off of me, and then she asks about the condom. I say no. So that's another strike. So now we just cuddle. We say it's okay. We don't have to have sex. We could just be two bodies next to each other, which that's most of what your relationship is anyways, intimacy. We all are starving for a lack of intimacy, so let's not pass up opportunities just because you don't get that. If you really have to, as a dude, you can walk in the woods, rub one out, and then walk back and just cuddle. I'm not to that point, but earlier in my life, I think I would have taken that advice if I was too. But I was able to be like, this is okay, this is nice. The make-out session was nice. And after we drop off the anarchist kid where he has to go, and it's just me and her for about an hour, she won't come up and sit in the front seat. I say, I don't want to be like driving Miss Daisy. Come on, sit in the front seat. She says, no, I'd rather sit back here. I'm not really comfortable about what happened last night. Which I love that she's dialoguing with me at least. A lot of the feminist, strong militant feminist types who feel like I was an asshole in that situation wouldn't even be dialoguing with me. I've experienced it before, and they don't even believe you should talk and figure out what's going on and what's the truth between your version and my version. So at least she was giving me that. So I said, I said, we had a great connection. It doesn't have to be purely sexual. It was intimate, and for what it was, I could be a great person in your life and a great memory, or you can make it negative, but I think that's on you. I stand behind my actions. And then she went into it a little bit more. She was like, I just feel like I was taken advantage of a little bit. It's like, oh wow, that's the second weaponization of sex. First one was when she brought up consent while she was on top of me, that she didn't feel like I was respecting her, while she's on top of me grinding, basically giving me blue balls. When you arouse a man repeatedly without relief, you are just pumping their balls of sperm. I don't know what the physiological part of it or the explanation of science, but there is a real reaction. The next day, if you don't masturbate or you don't release that, you get a soreness. So going from flaccid to the erect, and also getting your body pumped up as if you're going to have sex over like a half hour, an hour, it'll lead to soreness the next day. And it's a weird type of soreness, like you got kicked in the nuts. And so blue balls is a real thing. It's a real physiological thing. So not to say that women should have sex with you just because they gave you blue balls, but I put her as much in control of the situation as I could, although I initiated contact. I feel like as a man, that's usually kind of expected of you. And when she told me, I thought a guy like you would be carrying condoms. Apparently there was a role that I was playing, which she had already bought into, of some sort of, I was the guy who was driving, and I was the guy who already made it so we'd have alone time in the tent. She assumed that I was planning this out. It's interesting. It's a damned if you do, damned if you don't. If I was more of a player, I would have planned this out with condoms already. But since it was kind of like, hey, maybe this will happen, this will be cool, but it was a last minute thing. But also, I just don't carry condoms on me. I've been rolling the dice more than I should in life. I figure if by the time we get to that point, I know enough about them, they know enough about me, we should be responsible in our sex life, that if you had something, you should say it. But I've had sex with a couple people recently who had stuff and didn't say it, so that is, no, not recently, in Occupy Wall Street. I'm supposed to be talking about Occupy Wall Street. So in the car, she says, I feel like you took advantage of me. And I said, oh, okay. The second time now that she's using her identity, I feel, to defend. And this is also another example in my life where if you don't have the sex, or if the pursuit doesn't go well, there could be negative feelings on both sides, which could be coming from sexual frustration. If I had a condom on me, or if I had pandered more to her version of feminism, where I should just accept her version of reality over mine, even if I feel like it's irrational, is what I'm summarizing her version of feminism. Because luckily I had rational components to the story in my defense that could defend me. So when she said, I feel like you took advantage of me, I said, I was not in my right mind. Remember, you didn't smoke the hash, I did. And it was really strong too. So if anything, I feel you took advantage of me. I was not sober. You were. That shut her up quick. But I wasn't being a dick. I went back to my point. We had an interaction. You could look at it as a positive. Two people meet up, even if we didn't have sex, or you could look at it as a negative, but it was just two strangers sharing something. I think you're awesome. And she explained more about where she was going in San Francisco. She met a guy online or something. And I said, now, is this going to be a sexual thing? She said, no, it's just a friendship. And I'm like, well, be aware of your interactions. Did you expect to hook up with me? No, but things could turn into something, and this guy could have expectations. She said it's not her fault, but just because it's not her fault, she should be aware of it. And this girl wasn't being as rational about her interactions or aware of certain things. So yeah, I don't know if I got her to. No, I didn't get her to sit in the front seat. So I don't know if she actually forgave me for what she felt was a slight against her. And then also I have to take some responsibility, because no one is completely irrational. No one's 100% correct. And feelings justify themselves. So if she felt I took advantage of her, how did I? I, through my awareness of social interactions, made sure that we'd be alone. Just knew how this guy was going to play himself out of the role of possible pursuer. And then also, I got her aroused without being responsible having a condom to actually get her off. And so, I think that would be my fault, is I prepared the scenario in which we would hook up, and then I got us to that point, and then I just didn't finish. But in my defense, she scared me a little bit when she started talking about consent after I thought we were both clearly initiating physical contact, and then she acts like she's withdrawing consent, repeatedly saying no, while we're escalating physical contact. And then when I de-escalate, then she asks me if I have a condom. Going consent, no consent, consent, no consent is a scary game to play. And then claiming she was taken advantage of when I was a person who was, even if hash doesn't affect me like it would the average person, how was I in more control of her in that situation? I guess it was my car and my tent, so if I wanted to be a jerk, I could have been a big jerk. But so she could say that she only reciprocated my physical contact because I was in a position of power over her and we were stranded in the woods and I could have just left her there. But my character, that's where you have to just go to character. We had spent by then a whole day in the car together. So her judge of character of me is, I try to reveal myself to have an honest character with integrity. And then also there's a camp right next door we had just met. She had the anarchist kid. So, and then also she reciprocated my physical advances to the point that she was actually on top of me, which, telling me I'm not respecting her, and then afterwards telling me I took advantage of her. So I didn't agree with that. Although, yeah, I think the only thing would be for me to be clearer about my intentions, and then also when I'm going to initiate something, have a way to actually do it responsibly. I didn't have a condom on me. And I think because I aroused her and there was possible connection, we didn't go all the way, she felt a little negative about the experience. And then she was now projecting that negativity through a defense of, well, I was the victim here. And that's very dangerous. That's why it's dangerous to form your identity around opposition, because then every time that you feel uncomfortable, you're going to look for a way in which you've been victimized. And that's what she was doing, grabbing at straws to try to interpret this encounter as a way she was victimized. And that's why I try to correct her and say, this isn't a good way to live through life. My defense, that's one of the reasons why I smoked, is it's not good to live life paranoid. But when I smell a little bit of funny identities or funny people, having been around a lot of people and always being curious about identity creation since I was young, smoking was a little bit to defend myself. I saw she wasn't smoking, I was like, this is good. Let her be more sober in this instance. And then also when she was on top of me and all that other stuff, I tried to initiate sex, but then I'd back off, really hear where she's coming from. And that's why when she was like, or like this girl who stayed with me in Airbnb, I like initiating physically and allowing that to happen as a wordless dialogue. But when I didn't feel anything, and I felt like a little bit of coldness, and then I smelled alcohol on the girl in Airbnb, that's where I was like, okay, we're going to have to be very clear if we're going to do something. And that's when I backed up. But was that all me? Because I did kind of talk to her before we were crashing, and I mentioned that her hair smelled like the ocean, and she laughed. And I feel like that one in Airbnb was just, we miscommunicated, but maybe not. The whole world doesn't want to love you, and sometimes you'll pursue people who you thought were interested who aren't. If you go slow but surely and make sure that there's enough, but that's where you have to have not only a way for the girl to back out because she might be physically intimidated, but also people want to save face. People don't want to be humiliated, and that's another way to hit on people where they can openly back out, and neither you nor them will be shamed, or maybe even you. And those are the lecherous types who hit on the whole world openly, but in such a way that the people who don't want them can easily blow them off as, they're just like that, they hit on everyone. But the people who do want them, well. But there's other rules that I've learned. No need to ever make someone feel uncomfortable. And that's what I was trying to tell this girl as we drove to San Francisco. We ended the night by cuddling. We said, I thought maturely on my part, sex isn't on the table. There's a little impasse. There's no condom. It was a great excuse. Maybe that's why I don't use condoms a lot. Either we trust enough to have sex without a condom, but then that's dangerous because then you're playing the baby game and a bunch of other stuff. So that was interesting. And the anarchist kid that I drove, he ended up in Occupy Wall Street. We went to Occupy Wall Street, and I had a lot of experiences there. So how many documents do I have? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22. And I only want to do 5 videos on Occupy Wall Street. So I just had another sex story video. I bring that up too because a lot of these Occupy Wall Street people have, a lot of the organizers were coming out of the college class who were socialized around this way. Whereas the weaponization of identities, identity politics, identity sex, and pretty much if you're a guy and you're pursuing sex with one of these females, it could get into this irrational categorization of not equality, but a trump card that they can pull out at any time. Which there's ways to defend yourself, like I defended myself, but I just try to avoid that altogether when I notice that people have an identity which they defend against reason. Well, that could be scary if they pull that out during sex, which sometimes seems unreasonable in the pursuit. The anarchist kid ended up out there, and since he was anarchist, he ended up in my same circle of people I was hanging out with. When I got to Occupy Wall Street November 1st, I went to this is going to have a nice little circle by the end of this hour. I'll describe I have 22 videos. So if I describe my overview of Occupy Wall Street in this one, then I'll have 3 more videos to do 22 documents. And then that's about 7 documents of video. And then 7, so that's about 5 to 10 minutes a document. That's pretty good. I could do that. So this will be 20 minutes just on the narrative of what I did in Occupy Wall Street. I went there with the Complete American's Guide to Revolution, and and a little bit of newfound swag from the Puerto Rico, Actual Love, Casual Love. Complete American's Guide to Revolution was my best synthesis of my politics to that point, but I've also written poetry by now. I've articulated myself. I feel good. I'm feeling myself. Just my biggest blind spot at this point is money, which comes out later on. It seems like I didn't have a responsible relationship to it. Still working on that now, but at least I don't have as much insecurity about it. So I show up November 1st. Everyone's hungover because apparently the General Assembly had decided to take some money out of their public coffers for masks and partying and stuff. And that is the issue, is that I looked up that they had about $750,000 donated to them. $750,000, maybe more, maybe less. By the time I looked at the books, it was down to 300,000, and then it got down to 100,000 and 50,000. It all disappeared. But when I got there very much with the populist idea that that's the people's money. And sure enough, when I first got down there, I saw a bunch of tents set up in Zuccotti Park, Liberty Plaza, which is a park that borders the church down there, the church which is older than the United States itself. Trinity Church was a land grant by the Queen, and then they were able to retain the land after the founding of the United States, and so a lot of those land parcels go back before the United States, as does Manhattan as well. Manhattan was a trading outpost owned by the Dutch, and then the British, and then, of course, American. Always cosmopolitan, international traders come in here. The Indians or Native Americans who lived here had a way of life where they would live at different parts of the island, different times of the year, eat clams at one part, fish a lot at another part, go out to Coney Island and hunt the rabbits in the summer. Coney Island, Coney is a name for a rabbit. It's either a Native American name or a Spanish name. Conejo, yeah, maybe one became the other. A lot of Spanish words came from the natives. So we're down there next to land held older than the United States itself. Nice historic feeling. And then it's also the heart of the financial center of Manhattan, which later on they tell us is actually in Midtown. A lot of hedge funds and international finance has moved to Midtown. But that was one of the many criticisms the dominant narrative had of us. When I showed up, I didn't care about that. I saw the tents. It reminded me of Calcutta. I've never been to Calcutta, but I've known people who've gone to India, to the slums of India, and it reminded me of a slum. Dirty clothes. It was really dilapidated. It was like a homeless squat. I've lived around homeless. I lived around anarchists and squatters, mostly after this time. This is when I'd read of anarchism, and I knew tangentially some anarchists, but this is when I actually organized and lived with them directly. And then, so I'm just walking around Shaz the writer. My thing was being a writer. I had business cards I made up. I believe I still have some business cards. Still. Yeah, I'll grab them later. I don't want to reveal the fact that I don't have any pants on. Passing out business cards. My name is Shaz. Who are you? What are you doing? My first thing after being there a couple days, my first day, I had a friend in New York. I would stay at his place, go back down there the first couple days. His place wasn't a long-term solution. Eventually, I just started staying there full-time. I didn't bring a tent, though. I just brought my backpack and my book proposal to sell. What they would do, I started to recognize the organization of their day in Occupy Wall Street, the first days of November, is they would always have people in the park having discussions. And they had this team called Facilitation. Facilitation would facilitate these discussions with a process of kind of consensus. Later on, when I learned about what consensus is, we weren't quite doing it right. And I would now subscribe to the C.T. Butler method of consensus, because I met him and his wife or life partner or whoever, but him and his partner go around teaching people how to do consensus. And consensus is a way of having shared values and then having a dialogue within a group that shares those values, that then you can hold each member of the group accountable to those values. It allows a minority to veto any proposal going forward, because if you're buying into those values, we should be able to reflect the will of the entire group. But if one person, being the minority, keeps vetoing proposal after proposal merely as a power play, then that would show that they're not buying into the values of the group, and now they can be excluded from the group. So consensus has a high threshold for agreement, because it's not merely democratic agreement, but actually everyone in the group agreeing. But since it has a very high threshold, it makes it so you have to be very sensitive to the needs of the whole group. And any proposal usually represents even the smallest constituency, because they've at least been heard out. And when you get to an impasse, either the group has to modify for that smallest constituency, or that smallest constituency has to agree that the group is going to pass it without their input. We've heard it, but we just don't feel like it's relevant. And at that point, the individual has to override their ego for the greater group, again, aligning with those values. So consensus requires a lot of self-control on the part of the individual to subordinate themselves to the group. And in order to do that, you need shared values, a reason why you're subordinating yourself to the group. If you don't have that, you have what we had in Occupy Wall Street. And this I articulate now because this is the exact opposite of what we had in Occupy Wall Street. We never had clearly identified shared values that we bought into. So when we would practice consensus, usually it would devolve to one person holding the rest of the group hostage, which would reflect poorly on consensus. And by the end of the Occupy Wall Street experience, most people were talking bad about consensus and the process, about how it's too onerous, and this is why things don't get done. There's groups, activist groups, in the anti-nuclear movement, the feminist movement, who've been able to use consensus effectively. The reason why I feel like it's our only tool right now that we can really create change is because it's the only way I've seen that you don't have to constantly look over your shoulders and wondering if there's an informant or a narc or an infiltrator. This comes from me talking to older activists in the Occupy Wall Street movement, and then also looking up just literature. So The Tyranny of Structurelessness is by Maureen Freeman, I believe. And I came across that article and it blew my mind open that this is exactly what's wrong here. Occupy Wall Street claims to be a structureless organization without structure. Maureen Freeman, or you just look up the title, The Tyranny of Structurelessness. It's on the internet. It was passed around heavily in the 70s. That if you claim to not have a structure, as a lot of these consensus groups do, that consensus is an anarchist tool, that we allow even the smallest minority within our group to retain autonomy and veto discussions if they really believe. Even the smallest member, even just one individual member, can claim to be protecting the values of the group. But that's what it's supposed to be, is that if you're really going to veto this proposal, it's not about your ego or your pettiness or what you desire. That's what we missed, that first step. Group values we all buy into, so that way if you are truly stopping up this whole process, it's because the group is going against its values. And then we can determine whether you're sincere or not, because we can decide whether your actions are showing that you're actually upholding that value, or if you're just upholding petty self-interest. Since we didn't have that step in Occupy Wall Street, most discussions would be held up by people tyrannizing by saying, no, veto, block. And then there was politicking, I'll block you if you don't do this and that, because there was no shared values. This goes back to our discussion as a society as a whole. There's no escaping this. Either you have a value-based discussion, or you have a discussion that devolves into power hierarchies. Where this article, The Tyranny of Structurelessness, came in, it was authority from the past movements who actually achieved change. These are the people who created Earth Day, the people who pushed for non-nuclear proliferation. They won, people who pushed for the first wave of feminism. They won real change, and these were groups modeled around consensus. But that's because if you're going to really represent values, it's the only way to do it. Because you have to allow that one person in the group to call out the blind spot of possibly the whole group if it truly goes against the values of the group. But the values are openly stated. And that's what the Tyranny of Structurelessness basically stated, that every group has a structure, acknowledge it openly, or else you will have people climbing it in secret. So no matter what, you're going to have people hanging out after, which we had in Occupy Wall Street, after the people were living in a camp in the park, which I started doing too. And then people were coming to visit during the day. And then those people who came during the day maybe had apartments or parents' houses, or they were better off than the supposed occupiers. I had nothing. My parents actually got evicted while I was down there protesting. My parents were evicted out of their house. I had less than nothing. I had homeless parents, and I myself was homeless. My parents rented out a room off of Craigslist and lived in a room with 5 other strangers like the real world. My parents are in their 60s. So they were in late 50s, early 60s at the time. But to not get too sidetracked. So the first day I was there, I saw the facilitation group. I saw the beginnings of consensus. And even though it was flawed And later on, I would find out why it kept getting derailed, and I would develop this hypothesis that we'd never had a group statement of values that we could hold each other accountable to. So that way, C.T. Butler told me this himself. I asked him, I was like, our groups keep getting derailed. He was like, you're allowed to kick people out who are being assholes. You just need a measurement by which they're being assholes. That's why it's so important to spend time on what are our shared values. So when someone's being obstinate just for the sake of being obstinate, we can use their words and their pattern of behavior. Look, at this looks like you're not abiding by the principles and the values of our group, but you're merely just trying to be a thorn in everyone's side. You have to recognize, you have to self-police, basically. Consensus requires responsible individuals who can police themselves. Otherwise, the group will step in and police you if they have to for the sake of the group. It doesn't mean naive optimism that everyone reins themselves in. You just, since it's very transparent, you shouldn't have to rein everyone in. But Occupy Wall Street didn't have the values. And then we also had a heavy-handed approach of just trying to shut these people up, which only emboldened them further. I didn't see all that the first day. I just saw the first parts of facilitation and my first experiences in a group modeled around consensus, and that was enough to, when you feel it for the first time, I would relate it to if you work in an office, if you've ever felt an office meeting where everyone feels that they bought into the group decision by the end. It's that compared to heavy-handed power structures, top down, is like a breath of fresh air. I didn't even know what this was, and I was bought in. I was like, the way that these people talk, they listen to each other. They actually, and then we had twinkles where if the group was in agreement, they would twinkle you, sparkle you up, or what they sparkle down to, down sparkles, up spark, whatever. We had a nonverbal way to check the temperature of the room, which was totally Occupy Wall Street's own doing. We had these mic checks where we can get everyone's attention. So we had a group identity, and we had group values. We just didn't vocalize them or put them down. We didn't articulate them to the point that we can actually hold people accountable to them. But we had enough of an identity where we policed ourselves for the most part, and that carried us through most of our group there. But then these people who started to form their own groups to the side, the ones who would go to a beer afterwards because they were college students, or the ones who came from different social classes. And the park had everyone. It had real homeless who were gravitated towards us because we were feeding everyone. We were doing over 2,000-3,000 meals a day. At the time, we were the largest soup kitchen in New York, all completely free. And the food was being made in sanitary conditions. We were getting kitchens donated to us where we would do our meal prep for a couple hours during that day, and then they would bring it to the park and feed everyone. Tourists would come. So during the park, during the day, it was a huge hub of activity. These facilitation groups, the first ones that I joined up with, and then we had the radical anarchist librarians who affected my life ever since then because they were the coolest people. They were the best that I love about anarchists, which are just the propaganda and literature. Just spread the word, and in the forum of ideas, anarchism will defend itself. The negative side of anarchism were the kids that I hung out with who feel like they have a justification to be violent without cause. And that's just their enacting power fantasies because they've been deprived of power in their life or whatever projection, but it's not rational. And I was on the wrong end of that. I had homeless people, which I've always been familiar with. I had poor people, which I grew up with. We had college kids. We had Camp France. New York and Manhattan and Brooklyn had this huge French contingent, so they came out. So we had these tents that they would just call themselves Camp France. We had the communist anarchists. That was anarchist row, pretty much. Communist anarchist, Camp France, the cigarette table. We had the spirit tree in the bottom where people had made it into a multi-faith tree of all religions. People would go there to meditate. We had the drummers who were playing drums nonstop. People got mad at them, but they just kept the energy going. Day or night, 24 hours, you had people out there drumming. And during the day, it was even louder. It seems like a lot of the street performers from New York came down there to be a part. We had something going that was attracting energy from across political spectrums, across identities and ideologies. We had the Guy Fawkes mask there, the libertarian guys there, everyone, the furries, the Pokemon people, the intellectuals like myself, I guess. But yeah, that facilitation meeting was the biggest. Later on, so that park got broken up in November 15th, 14 days after I arrived. I asked facilitation people, I said, hey, who's in charge here? No one's in charge. Well, do you Is it okay? Do you guys still need people? It's like, if I camp out? And they're like, And that's when I noticed the fissure in the identities. This is a movement. You're not inviting people in. I just asked you. I'm another body for your movement. They weren't too hot on that, because by then the break had already started. People meeting in secret, because since we claim to not have a structure, but we're not being transparent about what structure we're actually creating. There's one being created in secret. And the college kids and the other more people with more means, and then also people who are being paid to be there, started talking about how the problem in the park is these bodies. We had to get rid of these bodies because now we had the money, and we had to promote the agenda. We had to have an agenda now. We had to have demands and other stuff. We couldn't just have a discussion and a congregation of people who need a voice. We need someone to shape that voice. We need a leader. And so these people started stepping up to try to be the leadership of the movement. And I noticed in facilitation, the people who were facilitating these discussions were a part of that leadership push. And then also the head of our finance, those $750,000, which all disappeared, were a part of that leadership push. The head of all of our in-kind donations, all of our, we had enough clothes to fund 3 thrift stores. Easily more than 1 Goodwill. We had a warehouse full of clothes. When I would need new clothes, I'd go in there and give them my old clothes and just take something new off the rack, and it would fit me perfectly. We had racks and racks. We had a Marshall's worth of clothes. Who knows where all that stuff went? But the people getting to the top of all of these resources were the same types of people I know. So I was just watching. I was in the Starbucks charging my laptop or something, doing some writing from that first day, and this girl, she's complaining about her wet socks. It just rained, and I offer some socks. Being homeless and being around homeless people off and on in my life, foot health is a priority. Wet feet are soon going to become a problem. Keep your feet dry at all costs. That's almost more important than the rest of your body. So I offer some new socks. I went out there with new socks, if anything. And she said, "Oh, thank you so much." And I said, and she was a cute girl. I later stayed in a squat with her. She had a boyfriend at the time. I never was improper with her. Her boyfriend was really cool. I mean, by improper, it's like I didn't even express that I was interested in her because her boyfriend was cool, and they had a good thing going. I didn't want to mess up their thing. She was young, and sometimes these young girls, even joking around a little bit, throws them off. So I was always more like just trying to look out for her. But she was like, "Thank you," and I was like, "This is our money. These people have $750,000. If you need socks, we'll go get socks." And she was like, "Oh, it doesn't work that way." And I was like, "What do you mean?" She was like, "You'll see." She was already jaded. And I saw her in her look and how she talked to me. I was like, she's a real one. She's here. She's almost homeless. I could tell she grew up poor. Her teeth are all messed up. She's had some sort of addictions. Later on, I found out it was heroin. Her and her boyfriend were junkies. Another reason, too, I could just see that. However she interacted with me, I could just see that story. I'd come across that story already before. Thank you, Addie. And but no, I stayed in that squat with her when most of those people were junkies, and I was just observing that too. But so we got evicted on November 15th, and then we were staying either in churches or I found the anarchist squat, and I stayed there. And there was 1 or 2 anarchists there. There were a couple of us, but the rest were homeless. I saw a girl turned out there from the street. She saw it was a squat house, came in, underage, maybe 14, 15, started going out with one of the girls, and they started coming back with money. I saw her going from like random runaway homeless to being turned out by one of the girls. The city came once, tested us for free for hepatitis. A couple of people found out they had hepatitis that way. They came with a box of food, said, "We're not trying to bust you guys. We're not from the city to kick you guys out. We're from the city for health. Here's free food, and if you accept our food, just let us test you guys." And a couple of the guys found out they were carrying some stuff. Never hooked up with anyone in that squad. I had a couple offers, but I was smart enough just observing. But those are my people, the bottom of society. We all had a vibe, and we all kept it. A strong male presence is important and stuff like that. Sometimes you need to throw someone out. Someone's acting stupid. Some stuff can bubble up in those types of situations. The same thing with Occupy Wall Street. I walk around at night with some of the other guys. In a social setting, you'll naturally have the protectors, you'll naturally have the comforters, and yeah, it was interesting. And that kid who was, I didn't have enough time to explain the story. 20 seconds. I found him in a park later on at one of our gatherings, and he was talking to some girl I was kind of into, but I'd fallen out with their anarchist group. I was no longer cool, But the leader of the anarchist group told me she's kind of into you if you want to try something. But I wasn't a cool kid. And later on I see her around this institutional anarchist kid, and they started dating later on. So I guess he got his comeuppance.